I'm so happy to have Des here today from Tandem. She is the program supervisor, they are the program supervisor for Tandem Partners in Early Learning for Alameda County. Des joined Tandem in 2017 after living and teaching in English in Taiwan, Belgium, and Spain. Des's 4 years of teaching experience informs their trainings as they strive to facilitate interactive, engaging, and participatory workshops. I can definitely vouch for that. They really work hard to create a training that's not teacher-centered, but is learning-centered. Des is passionate about intersectional activism, social justice, and the pursuit of educational equity for all of Alameda's children and families. Sharing stories, sharing feelings. I think we all have a lot of feelings and these days, so it'll be great to have an opportunity to think about how we can share some of those feelings and help children with some of the big feelings they're having. So Des, I'm so glad you're here, and thank you so much, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Beth and Leah. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. As Beth mentioned, this workshop is called Sharing Stories, Sharing Feelings. So let's get started. Before we jump into the content, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself, my role, my organization. So I'm Michel. I'm the Program Supervisor for Alameda County for Tandem Partners in Early Learning. I recognize from the chat some Story Cycles educators that are attending this webinar. Thank you so much. So Tandem is an early learning nonprofit. We're located in San Francisco, Contra Costa, in Alameda County. And our mission is to focus on children 0 to 5 to ensure that they have the resources, skills, and confidence that they need to enter kindergarten ready to succeed. We do that through 2 programs, one of which is called, hi Cheryl, is called Story Cycles, which is our school-based program. It features these bright green bags filled with 2 to 4 multicultural, diverse, high quality books per student, and it's a book bag rotation program. And then we also have early learning specialists that will come into the classroom to do interactive read alouds as well as workshops for our Story Cycles classrooms. Our other program is called Early Learning Everywhere, and Early Learning Everywhere, the philosophy behind that programming is that a lot of the children that we want to engage and the adults in their lives may not be in formal education spaces. So we'll do strategic community partnerships with organizations like Refugee and Immigrant Transitions. We'll work with children's hospitals, Children's Fairyland, for example, and we'll provide programming like play groups, literacy events, interactive read alouds, workshops on early learning topics for family support professionals, educators, and families. So those are our 2 programs and a little bit about Tandem. Today, this is an online training. Leah already covered some of this, but I do want to try to make this as interactive as possible while also acknowledging that this is online and just going to be a little bit different from the normal format. So I'm going to ask quite a few questions, and I hope that you will participate, respond, share your knowledge with the group, and we're going to share by using the chat function. If you're not familiar with using the chat function, I invite you to test it out now, and even if you are familiar, you want to look for this icon at the bottom of your screen, click on that, and just use your keyboard to type in the chat. And so if you would like to introduce yourself to the group, feel free to do so now. And just something to note is that when you send the message, you want to, where it says to, there's a drop-down menu. And for the purposes, oh, hi, Tanya. For the purposes of this training, because I really want everybody to share their knowledge with each other, you need to go to that drop-down menu and you need to click send chat to all panelists and attendees, so that the other folks who are attending the webinar can learn from you as you share your thoughts. And I see lots of people doing it. Oh, yay. Okay, great. So our agenda for today, just to give you a little roadmap of where we're going, and I'm not going to read it for you because you guys can read, but that's our agenda. Objectives, we are aiming that participants will be able to define social emotional development, explain 3 ways that interactive book sharing promotes social emotional development, and then we're going to practice those techniques to teach social emotional development through books. Okay. So for our icebreaker today, and I do ask you to type into the chat, what is the power of a children's book to you? I see some people are still introducing themselves. Thank you. So somebody said creativity is the power of children's books, unlocking new worlds, helping children understand cultures. Ooh, this chat's going fast. Let me just make it a little bigger. There we go. Imagination and escape.
Someone said pure fun, Des.
Yes, pure fun, absolutely. Bringing together a group of children, teaching ideas in accessible ways, absolutely. Critical thinking, having fun in story time, relating to others, sharing their imagination. One of the best tools to engage with children, absolutely. Relationships, literacy, imagination coming together, so much more. Language, yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for those great ideas. And as many of you have pointed out, books are very powerful tools, right? So they can do all of those things. They can expand imaginations, teach children in new and engaging ways. And today we're gonna use the book as a tool to talk about how we can teach and inspire children, and also develop social emotional skills. Let's see. So first, let's define what social emotional development means. And this is going to be a very high level definitions just for the purpose of this training. But as opposed to me defining it, I know there's so much knowledge in this webinar. So I'm going to turn the question back to you. What does social and emotional development mean and look like? Can you please type your thoughts into the chat box again? So thinking about, what does social emotional development mean? Regulation, learning empathy, acknowledging feelings, ability to see others' perspectives, self-regulations, relationship with peers, in touch with emotions, sharing feelings. Ooh, development of the heart, yes, I like that. Allowing children's feelings to be validated, learning empathy and that feelings are okay. These are great. Being able to express what you feel, making connections, expressing emotions, controlling negative behavior, communication and connection, self-regulation. Absolutely. Yes. Okay, this is great. And this is why I knew it was better to ask you all than define it, because you all already are there, right? So when we think about social emotional development in a very high level, for children 0 to 5, I like to break it down into thinking about defining the emotion side and defining the social side. So for emotion, like many of you said, the ability to express emotions, and that starts with, first, can the child name the emotion? Do they have the words in their vocabulary, like proud, disappointed, upset, frustrated, right? That takes some teaching to get to those more advanced vocabulary words. Can they express those emotions when they feel them? So with babies, just learning how to smile, and then getting to the child as the child gets older, that they can verbally express the emotions. And then the real big one, right, that we, even as adults, are working on all the time, managing emotions. And many people said the key word there, right, the idea of self-regulation. Can the child regulate their emotions and come back to a calm state? And then also thinking about it in terms of social. So how the child interacts with others. Is the child able to form close and secure bonds with adults and peers through developing skills like learning to share their toys, seeking comfort in socially and culturally appropriate ways, ability to play independently as well as with others. That's really the social side. And I just want to pause here for a second and say that this definition is very focused on the child and their development. But I think it's also worth asking ourselves, how do children learn about social and emotional norms? How do children learn social emotional norms? Can you type it in the chat box? Cultural beliefs through group play, observation, TV, through their caregivers, interactions with families. Absolutely. So you're all right? So we're learning, and children 0 to 5 are learning social emotional norms through the interactions that they're having with people and also through the images that they're seeing. And this is where we have a great opportunity with books, right? Because books can provide us a new world to share with children that might be different from their immediate surroundings, that can model some of the social emotional development skills that we want to teach. Yes, great. And I see a lot more people in the chat saying through modeling, absolutely. Open-ended question. So why does social emotional learning and understanding matter? So before a child can develop academic skills in preparation for kindergarten, they must first develop regulatory and expressive skills, right? So when we think about a child entering kindergarten, when they get into kindergarten, they're going to be expected to learn things like to count to 20, to recognize numbers, ABCs, their shapes, some of the things here that we see in the kindergarten academics. But we really think about social emotional skills like self-regulation, the ability to focus, follow directions, cooperate, that they can handle frustration. As the pyramid, the base of the pyramid, before they can even get to the kindergarten academics, they need to have the self-regulation skills to be able to focus and listen to what their educator is telling them, right? And that also they have the social expression skills, so they're interested in learning, they're able to work in a group or to sit in the carpet and hopefully, not be hitting their partner right next to them the entire time, so that they can focus on their kindergarten academics. And so for that reason, we really think about social emotional understanding and learning as the foundation that allows educators to get to teaching kindergarten academics. So now that we have a little bit of the background, let's get into book sharing ideas. So I have this picture here from Thank You Emu, and I'd love for you to take a look at it and think about what questions, comments, actions you could use to interact with a child that would promote social emotional learning. And this is going to be a silent moment for you to reflect and look at this picture. And I'm actually going to say, don't type it in the chat. This is the only time that I say don't type it in the chat. But if you do have, and hopefully my background, if you have like pen or paper, this could be an excellent time to just jot down the questions and comments that you could think of. I'll give you an example. I might say, if I was sharing this page with a child, I could say something like, look at all that yummy food. How do you think the people are feeling right now? Or what's your favorite food, right? So that would be an example of 3 different things, because I could make a comment like, look at the yummy food, or I could say that food looks delicious, and a couple questions. So let's take a silent minute and think of as many comments and questions as you can with this image. Okay. So hopefully you were able to think of a couple questions. If not, no worries. We're about to get into that. But now Leah is gonna launch a poll, and the poll is gonna ask you to just check. You don't need to write in what you said, but just count how many interactions could you think of and select the number. And Leah, you'll share the results once it's done?
Yeah, it's looks like the surveys, we're still getting a few responses. I'm gonna close it in about 10 seconds.
Perfect, thank you. Nice. Okay, so a range, but I really think the highest was 5 things, which is excellent. And I just want to highlight how much knowledge and experience is already in this webinar as we get started. And my hope is that as we go through the 3 different ways that I've identified, that we can promote social emotional learning. Perhaps you will have a few more questions and comments up your sleeve for the next time that you see a page like this to share with a child. So thank you all for participating in that. Before we get into the 3 ways, I just want to get on the same page, so to speak, about the technique that we need to use to develop social emotional learning with children 0 to 5. And that's really by doing interactive book sharing, right? So for all 3 examples we're going to discuss, we need to use strategies to make the page engaging for the child by doing things like making comments. So for example here, we could say to the child, oh, you know, the baby's going into the water. That'd be a comment, right? Asking questions. How do you think the baby's feeling? Do you think the baby's happy to be in the water? Do you like to take a bath? When do you take a bath? Incorporating actions. So maybe we could say like, oh, let's take a bath like the baby. Can you help me wash the baby? Get silly, having fun. Like we could say to the child, you know, what sound does the water make, splash, you know, having fun. And ultimately, we always want to let the child lead the book sharing experience. So we can do that by letting the child hold the book, turn the page, choosing books that, or allowing the child to choose books that correlate to their interests. And when we do these things, when we ignore the words on the page, but we really make it about having serve and return interactions with the child through using the book as a tool for conversations, we're always going to have a social emotional learning outcome, because we're positioning the child to be engaged. We're providing an opportunity where the supportive adult and the child can bond and have a positive interaction. And we're increasing the child's confidence because we're really letting them lead and define the reading experience. And it's not something that the child can be bad at, right? Because it's not about reading the words on the page. It's not about they misread that word. It's about using the images to have conversations. So this is the mind frame we want to keep on our heads as we keep going, I should say, is these techniques of book sharing. And these are the 3 ways we're going to talk about today to promote social emotional learning: emotion vocabulary, resiliency, and self-enrolled celebration. So the first one, emotion vocabulary. Emotion vocabulary is the children's understanding and comprehension of feeling words like excited, worried, proud, happy, sad, angry. Books are great opportunities to promote and improve a child's emotion vocabulary, because we see many characters with many different emotions. And children are typically in a calm state or emotionally regulated state when we're doing book sharing, so they're more receptive to learning. So for example, here with Ruby finds a worry, we could label the feeling for Ruby. So I could say to the child, Ruby looks worried. If it was a younger child, I would label it. If it was a more 4 or 5, I might say, how do you think Ruby is feeling? And ask the child to provide the word. And then we want to make sure that the child actually has comprehension of the vocabulary word. So with younger children, we might define the word worried, the emotion vocab, by saying something like, worried is a bad feeling, like when you think something, like maybe you are worried that you upset your friend and they're going to be mad at you. So you might have a tight feeling in your chest. That's how I feel when I feel worried. Can you say worried with me? And then we can make it silly, right? So that the child's more likely to actually remember and maintain the new word by acting it out. So we could say, can we make a worried face like Ruby's? Right? That's my worried face for Ruby. And when we do these things, when we take the time to really label the feeling, define it, and act it out, we are having the social emotional outcome that children are going to be better able to name their feelings, as well as to recognize emotions in others, because we're asking them to recognize emotions in characters. So let's practice. So here I'm gonna ask you to come back to the chat. And here we have a picture from Nico Dibujo and Sentimiento. So I'd love for you to just look at this image, this page, and think about what questions and comments you could make to teach emotion vocabulary. So we're thinking about, what emotions do we see in these characters? How could we label them or ask questions for older children? Can we define them? And then can we act them out? Yeah, and thank you, Heather, too, for the point that you put in the chat of is it okay to have a negative attribution like bad given to a child when they're supposed to be accepting of all feelings? Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're right. I did say like worried is a bad feeling. I usually start off with category when I'm doing like child-friendly definitions of emotions with bad or good or happy or sad, because those seem to be the tree trunk of understanding, and then I try to branch it off into more of the nuance. But you're right, I would want to reassure the child that it's totally normal to feel worried. I feel worried all the time. I think we're all feeling worried right now with COVID-19, so it's so important to acknowledge that all feelings are accepted and good. And so in terms of trying to think about comments and questions that we could do with this page. Somebody said, what do you think he is thinking about, or is he looking at the sky? The boy looks interested. Okay, that'd be great. So we'd be labeling the emotion of interested. Attentive, curious. I see the little boy looking at the butterfly. Is he feeling curious or anxious? Maybe he is afraid of bugs. Oh, this is great. Why do you think he was having all those memories? Okay, a little bit more open-ended. What about the little girl in the back with the rope? Is that a smile on her face? Absolutely. So that's a really good leading question to help the child to identify another emotion for, can you see my mouse? Yes, for this girl in the back of this character. What do you want to say to the butterfly, right? Yes. What would you feel if you were the child looking at the butterfly? Yeah, great. And really we're just thinking about what questions and comments can we make that are going to get emotion words, feeling words, so that we can have conversations about those feeling words with the child and hopefully expand their emotion vocabulary as well. How do you think the man feels pushing the cart? Absolutely. Great example. So let's try it again with another image. So here we have another book, another page from a book. Any ideas how you could build emotion vocabulary with this page? What feelings can we label, define, act out? Questions? I'd ask how do you like it when your grown-up does your hair? Yeah, absolutely. Happiness with the family at the salon. The child is calm, relaxed. I see their girl's eyes are closed. Does she seem relaxed or calm? Mm-hmm. And then I also just want to acknowledge the question that came up. How important is it that the child gets the emotion right? So I think the important thing is that we're taking the book sharing as an opportunity to teach, but I think we should never expect children to get everything right all the time. And we're trying to kind of stretch that knowledge. So keeping it positive and not saying, oh, you got it 100% wrong, but trying to kind of connect it. So for example, if I ask the child, like, how do you think she's feeling? And they tell me she's feeling terrible. I'd say, oh, really? Like, I see she's smiling. To me, she looks calm and relaxed. Why do you think she's feeling horrible? You know, and then maybe they would tell me more about what this is bringing up for them. How do you feel when your hair gets done? Does it feel good? Does it hurt? Okay, great. So I think you all are experts on the emotion vocabulary. So let's go on to the next way that we're going to talk about today. Resiliency. So children need to learn resiliency, which means the ability to self-regulate and recover and respond as opposed to react to challenging or new situations. So when we're thinking about children 0 to 5, there's a lot of new situations that happen in the life of a child 0 to 5. For example, first day of kindergarten, not winning a game, having to share your toy, riding a bike and falling off. Or for example, like we see in this book, seeing a dead animal, perhaps for the first time. And with children's books, we have an opportunity to teach resiliency by fire drilling social emotional situations. And what I mean by that is I'm really relying on the scholarship of Mannequin Man Boykin here, who I pulled a quote from her dissertation, says that picture books can model ways for children to think about and act on a problem. So the image from the book is providing the child an opportunity to think through how they would respond, as well as how a character could respond in a social emotional situation like seeing a dead animal. And this is important because if a supportive adult has helped a child to think through a situation, the child will have more context and a mental roadmap of how to respond should that situation happen to them in the future. So we can help children to think about social emotional situations like this one here, by inviting the child to give the character advice. So we could, with younger children, we might do it in a more leading way, where we'd say something like, how do you think he's feeling? Maybe he's feeling sad. Do you think he could go find an adult? Or we could say with the older, 4 or 5s, we might say, what do you think he should do? And in that way, we'd be inviting the child to think through how to respond in this context. And then after we've gone through the process of thinking about giving the character advice, we can also make the personal connection to relate the situation to the child by saying something like, if we said, how do you think he's feeling? He's feeling sad. Then we could say, what do you think he could do to feel better? That would be giving the character advice. And then we could say, what makes you feel better when you're sad? So that the child is connecting the emotion from the character to themselves and personalizing it. And the outcome that we want to have here is that children build resiliency, which prepares them to face situations outside of the book, right? And that children learn how to respond to these challenging and new situations in ways that are safe and healthy and culturally relevant for them and their family or their community. So I want to go more in detail about that. Oh, and I like that somebody said, what can we say to comfort him? That's a really good example. Thank you for sharing that. So let's practice this concept of resiliency. Here, I'm going to guide you through thinking about how to teach this page. So here we have a picture from Goodbye Friend, Hello Friend. So the first thing we want to think about is, what social emotional situation do you see that you could talk about with a child in this image? So feel free to please type your answer into the chat. Yeah, so we could do critical thinking, worry, separation, sadness. Yeah, and I would say that the big social emotional situation that I'm seeing here, of course there are many as you're all pointing out, is saying goodbye to mom, right? This is a social emotional situation that most little kids do have separation anxiety when they're first have to spend more time away from their primary caregiver. So we want to help prepare children for this, right? By building resiliency. So we've identified the situation. Now we can think about what comments, questions, actions could we say or do to talk about saying goodbye to mom to go to school. I like, look at your new friends you'll meet. They look happy and ready to see you. Yeah, that's a great comment. What do you think the girl is feeling about leaving her mom? Look how excited her friends are to see her. Yeah, we could also just label, she looks sad. She might be having some anxiety. So then we could talk to the child and label maybe some of the emotion vocabulary there of anxiety. Follow the same tip we talked about earlier, which is recognize the child's feeling and then ask her how I can help her to feel better, right? So be inviting the child to give the character advice. Getting on the bus looks fun, absolutely. And so I love this because you already went to the next point, which is, could you and the child give the character any advice? And some people already wrote some great things. So, which I read earlier. What was it? Right, so the person who wrote, first recognize the child's feeling and then ask her, how can I help her to feel better, right? So we could say, if we're reading this with a child, we'd say, what do you think she could do to feel better, right? Or can you give her any, can you say anything to make her feel better? And then the child will say, oh, and give her advice. You'll see your mom again, maybe. And then how can we make any personal connections between this page and a child that we'd be reading with? So we could say, yeah, or look, your friends are waiting for you. Your mom will be back. Oh, no, it's a sad comment. We could say, mommy's always come back. And then for maybe the personal connection, we could say something like, how do you feel when you have to leave your XYZ, whether it's daddy or great aunt or whoever is the supportive adult in that child's life. And in that way, the child would be building empathy with the character and personally connecting. So let's take a look at another image and think about resiliency. Here we have bedtime for sweet creatures. So the first question, what is the social emotional situation? How can we talk about it with a child in ways that give the character advice and connect the situation to the child we'd be reading with or the children? And thank you all for the great comments that you're making about the last image too. I love this. Like, think of all the things you will have to tell her when she picks you up. That's a really great advice for this previous image. So with this image, if we're thinking about what's the social emotional situation. So we've got the bear. To me, it looks like bedtime, right? So the child is, from their face, maybe not too excited to go to bed, right? Some bedtime resistance. Yes, I love that phrasing of it. That was really good. Yes. Okay, so how can we ask the child that we'd be sharing this page with to give the character advice to make bedtime perhaps easier for caregiver, which in this case is mom, and the child? So, oh, I love this. We could say monkey is tired and ready to go to sleep with you. Time for a story. What can mommy do to help her? Yeah, absolutely. So if I was sharing this book with a child, I might say, oh, look at the character. How do you think they're feeling? And they might say, oh yeah, they're feeling a little angry. Do you think they want to go to bed yet? No. What can we do to help the character want to go to bed? And maybe they would say, read a story. And then personal connection would be, how do you like to go to bed? What makes you feel more sleepy? And in that way, we'd be connecting the social emotional situation, which is not being tired and ready for bed, to the child we're reading with, and be giving advice. Exactly. Ask the child why the character doesn't want to go to bed, and then see how they can help. Absolutely. Great. Yes. And saying things like, I see the monkey wants a story. Do you want to read a story to your bear? Absolutely. Great. Okay, so let's go on. So that was resiliency, right? The helping a child to learn how to respond to new and challenging situations. So this might be a challenging situation. This can be a new situation. And now I want to just take a moment, a slight detour before we go into the final aspect of social emotional development that I want to talk about, to touch on the importance of critical book selection. So at Tandem, we really rely on the scholarship of Rudine Sims Bishop, who is a scholar who very famously in 1990 wrote an article entitled Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors. This was an article that was a framework for thinking about multicultural book selection and the importance of addressing inequality of representation in children's books, specifically African-American children. And in that essay, Rudine writes, when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are part. So that is not the social emotional learning outcome that we want to have when we're doing interactive book sharing. So it's very important to think about the books that we're selecting and the kiddos that we're reading them with, especially if you're wearing an educator hat and you are book sharing with a diverse group of children. Rudine came up with a framework for thinking about book selection, and that framework is thinking about selecting books that are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I'm sure that some of you are very familiar with this, but just to define it, when we are thinking about a mirror, that means that we want children to see themselves and their own experiences reflected in the book. And I would say not just themselves, but reflected in ways that feel authentic and are not stereotyping or negative, distorted, or laughable, right? But that they are seeing positive depictions of characters that look like themselves. Then we also want children to have books that are windows, right? And a window is meaning that the book is allowing the child to learn through the pages about other people, places, cultures, things, experiences. And then finally, the book should be like a sliding glass door. And what that means is that the narrative is strong, the images are engaging, and it activates the child's imagination in a way that the child feels like they could literally slide the glass door and walk into the book world. This is really important, thinking about books that are mirrors, windows, and doors for the next two aspects of social emotional learning, which in my opinion is the most exciting thing that you can do with interactive book sharing for social emotional learning outcomes. And that is the concept of self-celebration and world celebration. So we want to share books with children that promote self-celebration, meaning that we want children to understand, especially children coming from underrepresented and over-oppressed backgrounds, that their identities are special and beautiful by increasing their self-esteem and their self-understanding. And we can really celebrate a child's identity when we choose books that validate the child's culture, race, language, experience, gender, family structure. How do we honor the child's identity? We do it by remaining curious. So I say it's important to think about your book selection, but then stay curious. Don't think that the book, there's never going to be a book that's 100% perfect, that perfectly represents that child. So we want to ask questions so that we can learn more about the child that we're sharing the book with, about their identity and how they see the world and who they are. So we want to ask questions, make comments that give the child opportunities to reflect on themselves and share their identity with us. So I'm going to give you an example. Here we have It Feels Good to Be Yourself. So I could say, if I wanted to honor a child's identity, I could say something like, which character do you like? What do you like about them? I might point out the non-binary character here and say they have short hair. Do you like your hair? What do you like about it? And in this way, I'm just opening up a door for a conversation with the child so they can tell me about their self-perception, their identity, how they're feeling about their hair, and learn more about them. And I want to highlight how important this is, because in the same way as we saw with this quote, that when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, it can have a really negative outcome on self-esteem. We can also see research that proves that when children are shown diverse, multicultural children's books, it has a really positive impact in terms of self-celebration and world understanding. So I have this quote here that's coming from a study that was focused on gender roles and gender roles. And it shows that, I'm just going to read it, exposure to picture and storybooks that challenge historically limiting gender roles. So books that challenge the idea that girls only like pink and are going to grow up to be homemakers, and that's it. So when we have books that challenge that, it counteracts stereotypes that can have harmful effects on cognitive, social, and gender development of young students. So showing books like It Feels Good to Be Yourself can have a really positive impact for children in your classrooms or children that you interact with when they get to see diverse gender expressions. And really the outcome that we want to have with self-celebration is that children learn respect for themselves and for others. And we want to promote that self-esteem, that self-understanding. We also want children to have a strong sense of world celebration, meaning that children, that we're expanding a child's knowledge of diversity and promoting empathy for others who are different from them. And so in an article by Freeney and Morvek from 2005, this is research that was focused on studying racial stereotypes in young children. The authors wrote, when children do not have direct experiences of a group, they are particularly vulnerable to stereotypes and bias in society and in books. When children experience books that show unfamiliar people dealing with issues or emotions they can identify with, they are able to relate to the characters and begin to gain a sense of common humanity. So we know that books can, stereotype, as we saw from Rudin's scholarship, and as I'm sure we're all familiar with, But also books are very powerful tools, like we just said, with our icebreaker. And when we take the time to show diversity in books, it can really counteract those stereotypes and bias that children are very vulnerable to. And how do we do that? Well, we want to do it in ways that expand a child's knowledge of diversity and empathy by normalizing diversity and connecting characters who represent different identities to the child in ways that are normalizing, not tokenizing or stereotyping. And I'm going to give you an example. So here we have dad and daddy, right? And so I can normalize that there's different family structures by saying something like, there's dad and daddy, they're taking the baby on a walk. Who do you like to go on a walk with? So I'm just normalizing, I'm stating the diversity for the children or child that I'm reading with. And then I'm connecting it back to the child so they can relate, because children typically go on walks. Who do you go on a walk with? For this baby, dad and daddy are the primary caregivers who they go for walks with. Similarly, here we have a character with hijab. So it could say, oh, look, this character is wearing a hijab and she's eating an apple. What fruit do you like to eat? Do you like to eat fruit? I'm not going to go on a really long thing about, you know, diverse family structures or Muslim culture. I'm just normalizing diversity. I'm naming it, I'm stating it. I'm not scared to talk about it with the child. It's normal. And then connecting it back to the child. And again, why do we want to do this? Well, it's Alameda County and the Bay Area with so much beautiful diversity, and we need children to learn respect for themselves and for others. And so let's practice this concept. So here we have another picture from a book. And if we were thinking about promoting self and world celebration, how could we do that? So we want to think about, for self-celebration, using the image from the book to ask a question that invites the child to tell us more about who they are. Does anybody have any ideas of what questions you could maybe ask with this page? Yeah, what do you like to do outside? What's your favorite place? Absolutely. Do you like gardening? Absolutely. What is she doing? What makes you happy? Absolutely. Great. What's your favorite vegetable? What does happiness mean to you? Excellent. And with world celebration, we might just acknowledge that this is a setting in a community garden and ask the child if they're familiar with community garden and talk to them about that, connect it back to them. So we could say, oh, look, you know, and Layla's at the community garden. Do you know what a community garden is? Have you ever seen one? Would you like to go to one? Do you like gardens? Absolutely. How can you help? Oh, I like that. That would be really fun. And then you could act it out maybe like, oh, let's dig. What kind of plants do you like? Oh yeah, no, people of all ages are gardening. Have you ever owned anything? What's a garden? Oh, good. How do you feel when you help your family on the garden? Do you eat salads? What kind of foods do you eat? The boys and the girls are gardening. Absolutely. Great. Those are really good examples. What's growing in your garden? Show me how the plants grow. Absolutely. And so again, the outcome that we want to have here when we're thinking about self and world celebration are questions and comments that are allowing the child to see themselves reflected with the book selection, and then that they can tell us more about their interests, who they are, their developing identity. And then with the world celebration, that we are connecting diversity back to them and showing them a new experience, a new culture. Have you seen a garden? How many plants do you grow, and can you name them all? Awesome. Okay, great. So I think we're gonna skip this for time, but now we've talked about all three of the concepts. So we had emotion vocabulary, resiliency, and self and world celebration. And here we have an example photo or image from a book called Family Pictures. So I'm going to invite you all to type into the chat, and let's try to think of examples on how we could teach emotion vocabulary, resiliency, and self and world celebration with this page with a child. So the first one is thinking about emotion vocabulary. What questions or comments could we use to label feelings, define the feelings, and act out feelings with a child with this page? So for example, we could say, how do you feel when having a fiesta with family? Yes, perfect. Happy, yeah. How do you feel when your family gets together? Begin with asking open-ended questions, absolutely. Depending on age, yep. How is this family feeling being all together? Looks like a party. How do you feel about parties? How does that make you feel? How do you think they're feeling? How do you think everybody is feeling? Yes. Have you ever hit a piñata at your birthday? Were your family and friends around? This is very good. Great. Excellent. I mean, the key word to look for when you're thinking about you know, having a moment to expand emotion vocabulary is how can you get the word feeling into your comment or your question? Great. So what about resiliency? This one might be a little bit trickier for folks. So the concept of resiliency, just to refresh, we're thinking about what's the social emotional situation or situations that might be new or a challenging situation for a child. And then what advice could we position the child who is reading the book with you to give to the character? And how could we personally connect? So, oh yeah, perfect. Already got it. So are you nervous meeting new family? That is a perfect example, right? Because in that way, we're identifying the social emotional situation, which is, ooh, maybe meeting a lot of people is kind of scary. And then we're connecting it to the child. Are you nervous? And if we wanted to back that up one more step, so that would be giving advice, we could say, oh, you know, this character is feeling nervous. What can we do to make them feel better? Or what can we tell them to feel better, right? How do you feel when you're not getting all the sweets that you want? Yes. Are you shy? Yeah. Do you like big crowds? Have you ever, yes. Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to keep up with the chat here. Are you scared of the fair? How did you feel when it was your turn to hit the piñata? Yeah. So maybe for some kids, hitting the piñata can get a little frustrating, or it can be really exciting, or it can be super fun, or a little scary. So it's a great moment to fire drill the situation ahead of time if we were reading this book with a child, so that we can kind of walk them through it and talk about it. Are you excited meeting other family members? Absolutely. How do you feel with a lot of people around? Great examples, everyone. Is it hard to wait for a turn to hit the piñata? Yeah, I missed that one earlier. That's great. Do you have a cousin you look forward to seeing at family parties? Yes, these are really great personal connections. And yeah, if we wanted to take it to a deeper level, maybe with a child that's been impacted by incarceration, we could say maybe this is a welcome home party for a parent coming home from being incarcerated. we can go a little bit lighter and we could say, what do you think is inside the piñata? But I do think that's a great example of how to touch on a more sensitive topic, which would be talking to children about incarceration. Do you like celebrating holidays? Oh yeah. Somebody shared, my 5-year-old just approached and noted that it looks like a fun fiesta, but nobody is wearing a mask. Good opportunity to talk about missing family parties. Yeah, absolutely. Right now in the time of shelter in place and COVID-19. Great. So these are really awesome examples for resiliency. I want to move to the next and final concepts that we talked about, which was self and world celebration. And some of the things that you all already wrote did kind of touch on that theme. But remember, with self-celebration, we're thinking about what opportunities do we have with a page to invite a child to tell us more about who they are so we can learn about them and celebrate them and their identity. And then also with world celebration, how can we, you know, normalize and expand a child's understanding of diversity? They might look different from their personal family or their personal culture and identity. So can anybody think of example questions for self and world celebration? Some people already said some things. So for example, we could say like, this is what a family celebration looks like for Carmen Lomez Gares. What does your family do to celebrate? Or do you ever get to play with a piñata? Or what clothes do you wear when you go for a special event like this? Remember our last party or wedding last year, somebody said, do you like to barbecue? Absolutely. And then maybe we can say, what food does your family like to barbecue, right? Because food is super cultural. How do you like to celebrate? Absolutely. Is happy to be with family. Just labeling that. Absolutely. What games do you like to play? Who do you see at gatherings? How do they make you feel? What do you see a lot when you have parties with your family? Look, oh yeah, look at the colorful decorations in the piñata. What do you see when you have parties? Absolutely. Really great examples. And all of those questions would allow us to get to know the child that we're reading with more, right? And allow them opportunities to tell us about their identity and their family culture. And it's so important just to keep it open with questions instead of labeling their identity for them. What do you celebrate in your family? Absolutely. Do you invite your neighbors, school friends? Okay, perfect. Great job. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm so thrilled that this chat is working and everybody's coming up with such great ideas. So we've come to the close here. We talked about 3 things. We talked about emotion vocabulary. We talked about resiliency, and we talked about self and world celebration. And we're back at the same image that we started with. And what I'd like to invite you to do is take another silent minute and think about, have any of the questions that you thought about in the beginning to develop social emotional understanding with this image, have any of those questions changed? Can you think of new additional questions, questions that would promote self and world understanding or celebration, questions that would promote resiliency? And if so, I invite you now just to, again, go back to your pen and paper and write down those ideas, and then we will launch the poll after a minute. Okay. Leah, do you want to launch the poll when you get a moment? Thank you.
Okay, should be up. I'm going to close the poll in about 10 seconds.
Thank you. Oh. Oh, I like that picture or that comment somebody put in the chat too. I see someone who is a hero in this picture. Do you? Who is a hero to you? Wow, that would be a great conversation starter. Oh, nice. Okay, so we're ended at 7 things. So in the beginning, we were more around 5. So I'm grateful, or I'm glad that some folks have picked up on some new questions and comments that you can incorporate along with the other great comments and questions you already had for teaching social emotional development through interactive book sharing with children. And so just to review, these were our objectives. I do think Leah and Beth will be sending an evaluation, so please do share your feedback there so that I can improve this training. And I wanted to take a moment just to highlight, for the purposes of today, since we only had an hour, I was not able to model the social emotional read aloud. But if you do go to this, I don't, what is the hyper URL link, which I can put in the chat, I've actually recorded some virtual read alouds that are on YouTube about talking to kids about COVID-19, as well with actually using the book Ruby Finds a Worry that we looked at earlier, as well as 2 books. One's about a gender nonconforming child and another one is about a transgender child. And so I invite you to check those out if you'd like to see some more examples around talking to children around social emotional learning through an interactive read aloud. And then we also have many read alouds that are in other languages focused on different skills, literacy skills and kindergarten skills on this website. So that we get follow up with that link too. And these are the references that I used today. And then just want to thank you all so much for your time, your great thoughts and knowledge that you shared. Please do stay in touch with us. My email is des@tandembayarea.org. You can go to our website, find us on Facebook and Twitter. We're at 2 minutes till, so I don't know if we have too much time for Q&A at this point, but.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being on this webinar today. And we have lots of other opportunities available if you want to hear more from Tandem staff. They've been really great trainers for us. So please add that information into your evaluation. That'll help us a lot. We're planning our 2020-2021 calendar, and we'll be including some of their trainings in our calendar, so let us know. Don't forget to do your evaluation, so that's another thing. And thank you so much. And the video for this will be emailed out to you, and we will have it on our Facebook channel. Leah will send those out to you. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all have a really good week, and a short one at that.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Des. We'll see you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.